Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the day 4 of our free week in software quality assurance testing offered by SkillReal Academy. Let's take a look what we have covered so far. All right, day 1, we learned what testing is. We learned about requirements. We created our first test case. We executed that test case, right? Day 2. We dived into the world of bugs. We found some bugs, we hunted down some bugs, and we interacted with the developer to get that particular bug fixed and retested and closed. Yesterday, we learned about the backend of the software. We looked into the concept of databases, data layer of the application, where the data is kept, tables, and we also wrote our first SQL query. And as you saw it yourself, SQL is very simple. We don't call SQL as a programming language for a reason, because it really sounds like a simple English. So right, so that brings us to today's topic, which is Python. That one, unlike SQL, we can call as a programming language. But Python is known to be beginner-friendly programming language. So among all the other programming languages, Python would be the easiest one, but at the same time, one of the most powerful languages out there. Also, popularity of Python has been growing extensively. So these days, Python has become more popular than many other languages, right? It was behind Java a couple of years ago, but it already surpassed in popularity Java in the market. And it's kind of competing with JavaScript, I would say, these days. Okay, so tomorrow, based on what we learned today, we'll see if we can use Python to interact with the web pages automatically, right? What we call as a test automation. Okay, so what exactly are we going to do today? We're going to write our first lines of code in Python. So we will start coding in Python. All right, so it's going to be fun. Another important news for everybody is that you will be making mistakes. You will make a bunch of mistakes. That's part of learning process, and you will get a feedback from the programming language, right? The programming language will give you error messages. We'll try to tell you something is wrong with your code. And learning how to read those error messages is important part of being a IT professional, being a QA tester, automation tester. So that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to learn how to read the error messages together. Third concept is data types. By the way, we talked about data types yesterday, right? We talked about integers, we talked about text, and also date, and so on. Today, we're going to look into that integer again, but from Python perspective. String, which is the same thing as text. And we'll also learn a new data type, which is called a list. It's an interesting data type, which contains not one value, but a bunch of values. We'll also create a variable, our first variable. It's like a container. And we'll also see the if-else statements. That's a conditional statements. That's a control flow of the application. Also, at the same time, we will try to use the AI, since it has become one of the household topics these days. We'll see how we can use AI in coding, how artificial intelligence-based tools that we have available to us, such as ChatGPT, should be used for efficiency. So basically, it is nothing to avoid. It's something that you should be you should learn how to use. You should get used to those AI tools because it's going to be part of daily life of every IT professional, and not only, right? So just like you would use Google, nowadays you can utilize those AI tools for coding. Okay, so we're going to look into that too. Okay, so first things first, let's understand that learning a programming language is just like learning a foreign language. It's just like learning a foreign language such as Italian or Spanish. And what do you do when you're learning a foreign language usually? How do you go about it? You learn the words, right? So you need to increase your vocabulary. And at the same time, you need to be able to put those words in the correct order, which what we call as a syntax, right? So you need to increase your vocabulary, and you need to learn how to put those words in a correct order. So that those are the keywords and syntax. Same approach, same idea works for programming languages such as Python. All right. Then we need to practice more. You need to do more coding, as much coding as possible as part of the bootcamp, as part of your self-study, as part of your homeworks. You need to do as much coding as possible so that you get used to it, and so you will be able to solve any challenges, code challenges that you might face. At least you will be able to make some attempt in those code challenges so that the interviewers can understand your thinking abilities, your thought process, so that they can give you a mark and then compare you with the other candidates and choose you, right? That's the end goal of learning Python as part of this bootcamp. So another important thing that we need to take into account is we should not be afraid of making mistakes. That's part of learning. You are going to make mistakes, and you need to be able to learn from your mistakes. Okay, so just like you shouldn't be shy to speak a foreign language in order to learn the foreign language, you shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes. All right. So I think we're clear about that. Now, the first line of code in any programming language that a beginners learn is hello world. So that's something that we're going to learn. We're going to print hello world text into what we call as a terminal, right? So I'll explain what the terminal or what the code editor is in a minute. So that's something that we're going to do. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to show you an online code editor. That's an online code editor called Replit. But as part of the bootcamp, you will be using a more actual tool called Visual Studio Code. So this right here, what you're looking at is a Visual Studio Code. Okay, so this is a Visual Studio Code. As you can see on the left-hand side, you have your files. So you can create a folder here, you can create a file. On the right-hand side, on top, you have your code editor, right? This is where you type in your code. And at the bottom, as you can see, it says terminal. You will see the results of your code, right? So you write a line of code and you can execute, you can run your code using this run button. So this is one way of running. And you will see the result at the bottom in the terminal. Okay, so code editor at the top, terminal at the bottom, and your files on the left. So this tool, this particular Visual Studio Code or VS Code is going to be used extensively during the bootcamp. So you're going to get used to it, and you'll be as familiar with this as you would be with a Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. So this is a code editor. But as part of today's session, we're going to use something more easier and more straightforward, which is a browser-based code editor. So on the left-hand side, as you can see, my screen is split into two sections. On the left-hand side, I have my code editor. This is where I will type in my code, and on the right-hand side, we will have our results printed. Okay, so terminal, another word for terminal is console. Terminal, console, same thing. So you probably have seen those black screens sometimes in movies, maybe, or whenever you see some news about hackers hacking some system. Those black screens are also called as terminals. Okay. And by the way, in your computer, you have a terminal too. This is one of the terminals. This is called a command prompt of Windows. Command prompt of Windows. So this is also a terminal in a way. All right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and type in our first line of code. So it is as simple as typing an English word, print. Okay, print, and you will open parentheses. When you open parentheses, code editors usually automatically close it for you. You see, I just put the opening parentheses, but then it closes it for me automatically, just to make your life easier so that you can code faster. Okay. Now, in there, I will start with the quotes, single quotes, and I'll explain that also when we cover the data type string in a little bit. But just take it as is for now. And we will type in whatever the text that we want to print to terminal. Okay, so my code in the left-hand side, and I will go ahead and run. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we have the result. Okay, so you can do that on your own, definitely, in any text code editor. And as part of the bootcamp, of course, that Visual Studio Code will be installed on your laptop, on your computer, and this is going to be the first thing that you're going to learn anyways. So as you can see, what we just did was we used a keyword print. Remember earlier I said learning a programming language such as Python is similar to learning a foreign language such as Italian or Spanish. Now the first keyword that you used or you learned today is print. This is a built-in function. We refer to this as a built-in function. So it's already there, and you just have to learn it and use it. Okay, so whenever you use the function print or the keyword print, it's expecting, okay, what do you want me to print to the terminal? And so you need to give some value there, right? Hello world. We achieved the result, so it's printed right here. We can go to the next line and print another message here. So this time I'm just going to put in some number. Okay, so we're going to cover the integer data type as well. As you can see, just pay attention. I'm not putting any quotes around the number because it's a number. It's not a text. So I'll print again. I'll run the program again. As you can see, it printed the 10,000 value as well to the terminal. Okay, so this is what the print does. All right, so we're clear about that. This is the easiest line of code that anyone would run whenever they're learning a programming language. Okay, all right, so that being said, let's move on. So next important concept that we want to cover is that errors. So you will be making mistakes. right? You will be making mistakes. So you need to be prepared to make mistakes right from the beginning, basically, right? So you need to accept that fact that there will be mistakes. So you need to start paying close attention to what kind of error messages you're receiving from the Python or from the tool that you're using, right? As you know, what does the fail stand for, right? Each letter in fail stands for first attempt in learning. So it's not a failure, it's just our first attempt in learning. So what you see here in red are the type of error messages that you might receive from the program when you execute your code. Okay, so different types of error messages that you might receive. So let's start looking into some of the error messages together. So in order to break the program, what I'm going to do is I will go ahead and first thing, this first letter P, do you see that? The first letter P, I'm going to change it to capital P. Okay, going to change it to capital, uppercase P, and it underlined right away, right? So the code editors are here to make our life easier. So it's already telling us that something is wrong with your code. Okay, let's go ahead and run and see. Here we go. As soon as I ran the code, I received an error message. Let's learn how to read the error messages. Error messages are read from bottom to top. Okay, keep that in mind. Error messages, whenever you're reading an error message, start from the bottom. All right, so there are many things that you do, upside down in programming. So you're starting from the bottom, and let's read what type of error message is that. So the first thing that first keyword that you read is the type of error message. So you need to keep that in mind. So it's a name error. Name error, and it says name print is not defined. And it's actually telling you, did you mean print? See? So remember I told you there are keywords that you need to memorize, right? There are some keywords. They're not difficult actually, right? So it's print, but you just have to memorize that it's written in lowercase. Just like you would learn the vocabulary of any programming language, right? So any new words, you're learning some new words in Italian. Just like that, this is a new word that you were supposed to memorize. But keep one thing in mind. Python is case-sensitive language. What does case-sensitive mean? Anybody from the audience? So you can put your answer in the chat. What do you understand when I say, well, this language is case-sensitive, or this program is case-sensitive, this field is case-sensitive? So let's go ahead and put your answers to the chat. Okay, so alrighty, it gives you different meanings to upper and lowercase. Yep, exactly. So uppercase letters doesn't mean the same value as a lowercase letters. It gives you error for the simplest mistakes. Simplest mistakes. You can call that, yes, you could call that as a simple mistake, right? So it's a case related mistakes. Spelling error, lowercase, uppercase errors. That is right. Yeah, it is pretty much a spelling error, but in English it might be a correct spelling, but the case has to be correct, right? So let's put that back. Let's put that back and rerun. Everything's okay. The error went away, right? But let's now try to break it in a different way. And I'm going to take away that last ending parenthesis this time. I'm going to take away this parenthesis And again, it is the text editor. It's a tool, and it's already giving you a hint. First of all, your code is underlined. That means there's something wrong right away. So you need to, when you hover over, when you come in, with your cursor and look at it, you will get some hints. As you can see, it's already telling you, okay, this parenthesis was never closed, right? Let's go ahead and run and then see what type of error message that is. What was the previous error message that we had? It was name error, right? It was a name error because it was trying to understand the keyword print, and it didn't understand because we wrote it with the uppercase, and this is not one of the keywords that Python is aware of. So it says, I don't know that name. It's a name error. But this time, it's not a name error. It is a syntax error. It's a syntax error, right? It's like a grammatical error. You could think of it that way. So far, we have learned name error and syntax error, right? So those two errors that you'll be receiving many times as you start coding. And as I said, reading the error messages is part of coding. It's part of being an automation tester or a developer. And it's not difficult. As I said, everything is made to make your life easier. So the programming language is already telling you, giving you feedback, syntax error, this parenthesis was never closed. Let's put it back. All right, let's run. Everything's working, all good. Another mistake that we could do is I just removed the quotation mark there. I removed the quotes, as you can see right here, unterminated string literal, right? It's difficult to understand what it says. Let's go ahead and run our code, and as you can see, it's a syntax error, and it's giving you an upper arrow right here telling you that this single quote is never closed, right? So you're going to have to find where to close it and make sure you put it. Okay. All right. So we learned some of the examples of error messages and how to read an error message. We need to read from the bottom to top. Pay attention to what type of error message that is, right? So as you saw, it's either a name error or a syntax error. So you're going to have to be able to read it and understand it, and you will start seeing some similarities between the error messages, and you will be able to quickly find the issue in your code and fix it. But that's going to require more and more practice and self-study. Okay, how to use artificial intelligence for coding. Artificial intelligence can find the issues in your code. It can find the issues in your code, and you can ask the artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, basically, to analyze your code and then give you some solutions. And it can also give you ideas to solve a coding task. It can also give you ideas. So if you're stuck at certain place and you're not sure how to proceed or how to solve that particular task, you could actually ask the artificial intelligence or the ChatGPT to give you a hint. Okay, so it's very easy to register for the ChatGPT. Go ahead and try to do this, and we're going to show this as part of the bootcamp as well. It's not cheating, right? Using ChatGPT is not cheating. As I said, it is part of learning process these days. Okay, so everybody, if you haven't done already, you can go ahead and then register. So it's ChatGPT. It looks something like this, right? And then you're going to go ahead and sign up, and in there you will be able to get hints about your code, basically. So it's very straightforward and easy. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. String data type. String is a text. String is basically a text. And why do we call it as a string? That's because, as you can see, it is referred to a string of characters, bunch of characters attached together as if, using a string. That's why the keyword string is used in Python to refer to a text. So string must be surrounded by quotes. String must be surrounded by quotation marks. It can be a single quote or it can be double quotes. So as you can see here, Jane surrounded by single quote, that's a string. That's a text for Python, right? If you surround any value with quotes, Python will understand that as a text. It will say, okay, this is a text, this is a string. And the whole sentence can be within the quotes. Hello, I am a QA engineer, or I am learning coding today, right? So those are some of the examples of strings. So if we go back to our initial hello world line of code, this first line of code right here, this is a string. This is a string. I could also surround that within double quotes as well, right? So I could say, hi, I am a QA engineer, and go ahead and run. And as you can see, you will have that printed. So what is the purpose of having single quotes and double quotes, both of them? Well, if you start with single quote, first of all, make sure you complete with single quote. Okay, so if I start with single quote and then end with double quotes, right, something like that, that's going to be a syntax error again, because we start with single quote and ended with double quote. That's not going to work out. Okay, so it's very simple and logical, basically. So you start with single quote, end with single quote. Same thing. You're starting with double quote, make sure you end with double quote. But how about if I wanted to write something like, I start with single quote, right? Whenever you type in a single quote, it's gonna put, the tool is gonna put the second single quote for you. As I said, as soon as you put a parenthesis, see that again. I open parenthesis, it will close the parenthesis for me. I open a single quote, it will close the single quote for me. Okay, so tools are here to make coding faster. Now, what if I'm going to type in something like, I'm at work today? How about that? What do you think is going to happen if I run this? I'm at work today. Go ahead and you can put it in. It's going to be a syntax error. It's going to be an error message, right? So why do you think it's going to be an error message here? What is the reason in line 5? So when we're discussing the code with friends or with colleagues, we need to mention the line of code. Also, as part of the bootcamp, and you will be asking questions from the teacher as well. So if you say, oh, I have an issue, could you please take a look? You need to mention the line of code as well. I'm not sure about line 5. Well, let's take a look at the line 3, right? So this is a way programmers or QA automation engineers would speak. So line 5, it's a taking a look at your answers. It's an extra quote, it's an error, it's a quotation, right? You guys are right. Yes, there's something wrong with the quote, right? As you can see in English, I can write I am. I can use a short version of I am. I'm at work today. in this particular case, the solution would be I'm going to put double quotes around it. Okay, so this way, now it's going to work. As you can see, that single quote also comes up in my terminal, right? So if you have some single quote within your string or within your text, then it's better to surround it with double quotes. Okay, so that's a way to go. So you take any value and surround it with quotation marks, that's a text. That becomes a text for Python. Okay? All right, that's clear. All right, now, next, integer. We talked about integer last lesson when we were looking into a employee table, right? We were looking at the employee table and we talked about employee ID, and then we said employee ID is an integer. And then I asked the question from the audience as well about what is integer, right? So we gave a definition. It's a whole number. It's not a decimal number. It's not a fraction. Integer is a whole number. If you look at this graph here, or a number line, in the left-hand side, from 0, you have negative integers. You have negative whole numbers. On the right-hand side, you have positive whole numbers. Now, in the middle, 0 is like a neutral number. It is still a whole number. It's an integer, but it's neither positive nor negative. Okay, so this was like a small recap of algebra. Anyways, so we know what the integer is. Let's go back to our code. As you can see in line 7, we're using an integer. We're using an integer right here. We can do another integer here, as you can see, minus 10, and you can print. It's going to work just fine. If it's an integer, because it's numeric, you don't have to put it, you don't have to surround it with quotation marks. You don't have to surround it with quotation marks. But if it's a text, if it's like a text, right? If I have a text such as, let's say, someone's name, like a Mike, right? I have to put it within the quotation marks. If I remove the quotation marks completely around this text, it will start underlining it. So it says undefined name. So Python is telling me I don't know who the Mike is. I know what print is. I know what print is because they taught me. They told me that whenever you give me a command print, I have to print something to the terminal. But nobody told me what Mike means. So Python doesn't know what Mike is, right? So it's trying to understand, is it some type of command that I have to run? Is it like a print command? But I'm not aware of a Mike command. So what you have to do is, so if you run, you're going to see a name error, as you can see, right? Name error, name Mike is not defined. I don't have Mike in my vocabulary. So you're going to have to surround it with quotation so that Python will think, okay, it's one of the strings. So I just have to print it. It's a text, basically. Okay. One interesting thing with about the integers is that you can perform mathematical operations with integers right within your code. So if you wanted to do like a addition, 200 plus 300, and then run, you would get 300, right? 100 plus 200, you have 300. Or you could do a multiplication there as well. You could do multiplication there as well. You can do division. I'm going to show you. So let me take a look at some of the questions. So do you always have to start with parentheses, then single or double quote? So good question. So there's a question where, and the question is that, do we always have to start with the parentheses? So let's answer this part first. So you see that this print built-in function is expecting parentheses. Yes. So it's called as a function, and as part of Bootcamp, you're going to learn built-in functions and also user-defined functions. So you will be creating functions as well. And whenever you use the functions, whenever you're calling the function, it's like a command. It's like a command to the Python, right? You're asking Python to do something. When you're asking Python to do something, it's usually comes after the keyword, after the name of the function. You start with the parenthesis, and then you give some input, some value, if it's expecting a value. In this particular case, this particular function is, can run without nothing as well. You see that it just printed an empty nothing, basically. If I don't put anything, if I put some value there, and it's going to print that for me. Okay. And as for the quotations, as I mentioned earlier, that is about strings. It's about text. If you are dealing with the text, then definitely use quotations, either single quotes or double quotes. That's your choice. But if you stick to one type of, quotations, just use it across your code all the time. Don't just use like sometimes single quotes, sometimes double quotes. That would be a mess, basically. So, all right. So with that, as you can see right here, we can perform some mathematical operations as well, right? So 9 multiplied by 3. So you can do math operations, basically. That's the point. Okay, so with that, let's go back. That brings us to the next important concept, a variable. Variable, although it sounds like a fancy word, something you may not have heard before, it's simply a container. It's simply a container with a label on it. Okay, so think of it that way. As you can see right here, you have like a bucket, right, or a basket, and then you have some data, some information being saved into that bucket, and that bucket has a name, right? So you can give a name to this storage, to this container, basically. So take a look at these two examples. Name equals John. So that means that you just took the value of John, right? That string, that text, that is the data. That's your data. And then you put it into the container name. Second example, GPA equals 4. You have this value, integer 4. You took that value and then put it inside the container called GPA. That's the idea. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you have the container, which is a variable. Okay. On the right-hand side of the equal sign, you have the data. You have the data with value. So again, in the left-hand side, we have the variable. On the right-hand side, we have the value. So let's go ahead and create some variables. Very simple. To create a variable, so let's actually go to the very beginning of our code. So we create a variable called message. I just came up with this. Okay, so you can come up with any name for the variable. Message equals to, and it's going to be some message. We'll say, I am learning Python today. Okay, so that's the message. If I run the code, everything will work just like before, right? All my previous print statements are working, nothing failed. What we just did was we saved message, that particular variable, with a value, with a data, with information of I am learning Python today, into Python's memory. Okay, so that's what we did. So that means that we can also now, we can refer to this message. We can use that variable. So now I could print that particular variable now. So instead of printing directly, I am learning Python today, I could save it into a variable, into a container, and then refer to that container here again. It's like a link. You see that? It's like a link. You can think of it that way, like a reference, like a shortcut or link, basically. Now, if I run the code, it will print, I am learning Python today. See? Where's that text is coming from, right? Where I'm printing message, but it's a container. What does it contain? It contains, I am learning Python today, this particular text. Very logical, okay? Now, what happens if I remove the line 1? How can I remove the line 1? In Python, and in any programming language, there's a concept called commenting out. Commenting out means make that line invisible. Make that line invisible to Python, so that Python will ignore that line. To achieve this, you have to put like a hash sign at the beginning of your line, but there's a shortcut to it, Control/. So if you press Control/, that line will be commented out. Now, if I run my code now, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen if I run the code now? Now that I commented out the line 1, what happens to my line 3? It's already highlighted. It is trying to understand what the message is, and it's saying, I don't know what message is. So it's going to fail, and it will throw a name error. Message is not defined. Now, do you understand what happened at the beginning when we actually removed or actually put an uppercase P instead of the lowercase letter P, right? That exact error message was there. Python was telling name error, I don't know what uppercase print is. In the same sense, in the same way, it's complaining, I don't know what message is. You need to define that variable first. You need to define that variable. Let's put it back. And now Python is like, oh, okay, that's what you mean. Now in line 1, you have the message variable, and now we're referring to that variable. Now it works. Okay. So, and we can put a year as well, right? 2023. So now, as you can see, because this is an integer, I didn't have to surround it with quotation marks. No quotes needed, right? No quotes needed. And I can print that too. So I could print the year as well. Let's print the year too. Let's print the message. Let's print the year. We'll go ahead and print. As you can see, I am learning Python today, 2023. Okay, so we are clear, more or less clear about the variable concept today, right? The next interesting data type that we're going to look into today is a list. A list is different from other data types such as string or integer in a way that it's going to store multiple values into a single container. So instead of one value, that's several values, right? So here's some of the examples. For example, students, right? So students is a list. It is a variable, by the way. It's still a variable, but that variable, instead of containing one value, it contains several values. And of course, there is a specific syntax that you need to follow. And if you see, there's a hard brackets at the beginning and hard brackets or angle brackets at the end, right? And every value is given, and there's a comma in between them. So students or fruits, apple, orange, banana, And here's another list of friends there, Alice, Bob, and Carl. So let's go ahead and create a new data type, a list in our code. Okay, so let's put this down a little bit, and we will create friends. There you go. Had some typo there. Here we go. So as you can see, again, I'm giving a name to my variable first, and I type in the equal sign, and then based on the syntax of Python, I have to use hard brackets, angle brackets, right? I have to use hard brackets. As soon as I type in one of the opening hard brackets, it will close it for me. Now I'll go ahead and use single quote and put in some values, some strings, but they're all comma separated, right? Names of people. So Anna, Jane, and Jack. So those are friends, right? So we have Anna, Jane, and Jack. They are friends. I can also print these values to the console too. So I can print the friends. So let's go ahead and run. And as you can see, the same value has been printed to the console. Okay. All right. Alrighty, so let's take a look at some of the questions again. So for the list variable, do you only use single quotes? Nope. So a good question. You can use double quotes as well. Absolutely. So you could use double quotes. Let's replace all of them with double quotes. And it works just fine. So yes, you can use single quotes, double quotes. So it's a string. Right, strings are strings everywhere, right? So whether they are separately as a variable or inside the list, everywhere they are the strings. So you can either use single quote or double quote to surround the strings. So one interesting thing about the list is that you can access every value separately within the list too. You can access those values. So if you take a look at this particular picture here, do you see 0, 1, and 2 at the bottom of each value? That means an index or the order of every value within the list, right? So every value within the list, every item within the list has an index. There's an index, and that index starts from 0, not from 1. That's another mind-blowing thing for newly beginners. Like, why from 0? The count starts from 1 usually, right? So it's like first person, second person, or first student, my first friend, my second friend, right? But in programming, it would start from 0 and then first and then second. So and if I wanted to access the, let's say, the Anna or the first friend, I would have to use a hard brackets after the list and then given the index name. As I said, the first index or the first item's index is 0. It starts from 0. So if I print it, as you can see, it printed Anna. It printed Anna. If I change it to 1, it would take Jane, and 2 would be Jack. Okay, so that's an interesting concept called indexes in programming language. Every concept that you will be learning will be studied in detail, basically, right? So as part of this session, we're trying to give you overall idea of interesting concepts in programming language again, but you will have pretty much separate sessions, right? You wouldn't be covering the lists at the beginning of the session. So there's a lot to cover by the time you get to the lists, actually, in the actual program of the bootcamp. So indexes, those are, there's a lot more to everything that you're covering here. All right, so that brings us back to the next slide, which is conditional statement. What's a conditional statement? This is another logical concept in a programming language, and it can be applied to our daily life as well. So if you look at this picture here, it starts with if, right? So let's try to read this picture. If it's snowing, if the answer is yes, then wear boots. Then wear boots. Makes sense, right? If it's snowing, if the answer is yes, then wear boots. If it's snowing, well, if the answer is no, if it's not snowing, if it's another situation, then you can wear sneakers, right? So that's an interesting and a very simple, actually, logical sentence here. And there are so many situations in application business logic where such decision making happens. For example, if there's a website that sells tobacco products like cigarettes and maybe alcohol, maybe wine, right? Those kind of websites usually have an age restriction. So they would put like a question to you. How old are you? Right? So if it's like an open question, or you can select from a drop down, select your age, right? If you select your age, let's say you are 13, and the program has to have this kind of logic behind the scenes. If the age is let's say less than, was it 18, right? If less than 18, then do not let the person to use the website products, right? Otherwise, if the person is older than 18, then yes, then allow the person to use the website. So that kind of logic is implemented using the if else. And let's take a look quickly. It's very simple, actually. So we'll go ahead and first create a variable called weather, and we'll make it equal to snowing. Okay, we'll make it equal to snowing, and we will write our conditional statement, and the logic is going to be, if the weather is snowing, then wear boots, right? Something like that. So if weather is snowing, then we're just going to print. We'll say wear boots. Okay. Else print you can wear sneakers. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and run. So as you can see, what kind of message we received? Wear boots, right? Why did we get this? Because the weather is snowing. So if I change the weather to, let's say, sunny, and then run the program again, now it says wear sneakers. Makes sense? Again, it's a very simple way, the way that we're describing, so that it's so that you can see the logic, so that you can understand, you can relate to it with your daily tasks, maybe. You see, programming language is here to solve business logic, and business logic comes from daily lives or issues or problems of the people. So conditional statements, if-else statements is a powerful way of handling that kind of business logic, basically. Okay, so we can try one more example just to make it. Let's go ahead and give what we're going to do is that we're going to create another variable called number, and we'll give a number 5 here, right? We'll give a number 5, and we'll check if the number is even or odd. If the number is even or odd. So if so now it's going to get a little complicated. If number, this is what I'm going to use right now is a modulo sign. Modulo sign. Modulo sign means when you divide it by some value, it will return the remainder. It will return its remainder. So if I divide the number by 2, and if the remainder is 0, right? For example, if you take the 4 and divide by 2, do you have any remainder? 0, right? If you divide 16 by 2, do you have any remainder? No. So that means that value is even. Okay? Otherwise, print that this value is odd number. We know the difference between odd and even, right? So let's go ahead and print, and it says odd number, right? It's an odd number. Let's try to change it to 6. Is 6 odd or even? Let's hear from the audience. Is 6 odd or even? It's even, right? It's even, right? It is even. So let's go ahead and run. As you can see, it returns even. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And the whole idea here is that if you divide, let's say 5 by 2, what's the remainder? Here's another question to you. Logical question. If you divide 5 by 2, what is the remainder? Divide 5 by 2. What remainder you have? If you divide 1, the remainder is 1. Guys, it's 1. So we're not talking about the result. We're talking about the remainder. What's left, right? If you divide 5 by 2, the answer will be like, okay, you have 2, and then you have a remainder of 1. What's left, right? Remainder means what's left, basically. So if nothing is left after you divide the value by 2, then it's even. So this, by the way, this particular example is a bit more complex. I mean, obviously, that's something that we're gonna learn, very closely. That's going to be one of the code challenges or quizzes and tasks that you will get as part of the bootcamp, and many more. Because those kind of challenges show up from time to time as part of the interview questions as well.